just feel normal again and to be at conferences and to intermingle. We're quite a conservative organization, and to date we haven't taken that lead yet, so we still operate a bit remotely. But it is nice to be amongst people, and thank you for inviting us. So my topic today is supply chains of tomorrow. So this is the clicker. So what I'll take you through is I'm going to look at just global megatrends, and then how that relates to macro trends in the FMCG value chain, and then specifically in three areas: future of food production, future of retail, and future of materials handling. So this is not a CHEP cell at all. This is really just looking at, sticking to the brief, looking at supply chains of tomorrow. And I have to just acknowledge Kelly Stino, of our Group Director of Innovation. This is mostly her material. And I have to say that this is done at an international basis, global basis. So we have to keep in mind that we're sitting in Africa, and on the African continent, in the southern point of Africa, which I think is very exciting because if you're in a market that everything is working and resolved, and there's not that much opportunities. We've got plenty of opportunities because there's so much not working in this place. But that having said, what I'm going to cover in the presentation, I think we have to filter through this lens of Africa. So we do tend to lag European trends by typically 2-3 years. And we do have, if we look at Africa, there's a lot of hurdles, infrastructural hurdles in supply chain. So, is there roads, is there even warehouses and materials handling equipment, and so a lot of hurdles. So there's unique challenges. But contrary to a lot of people's belief, this continent is actually quite tech savvy if you look at mobile technology. And there's opportunities of leapfrogging technology. So we don't necessarily have to follow exactly the same pathway that they follow in the USA or in Europe. We can leapfrog, and the challenge is to identify those opportunities. So first of all, the trends in the new world. So 4 big areas. First of all, the demographics. So the world's population is aging, and they are getting older and older, but much more mobile and much more technical savvy. Again, if we look at Africa, that's not necessarily the case in Africa. So this is a global trend. And then economic shift. Huge shifts in powerhouses. We had the USA, we've got China. But the trend is more localized. So, is international trade still going to be that important going forward? And again, there's opportunities for this continent and for local production, because I think there's a lot of things that we import into the continent. Climate change, a lot has been spoken about climate change, and how are we going to deal with that as a global population? We have to deal with it. I think a lot's been said in the previous speaker, etc. This is definitely a topic that needs to be addressed. And then the last one, the cities of the future, the urbanization. So more people flocking to cities, and so that gives rise to a lot of uncertainties. How is this older generation going to interact, and how are we going to do? How are we going to solve the environmental issues, etc. But that also gives rise to macro trends. So there's a huge consumer, there's accountability thing. Consumers are looking at accountability for producers and suppliers of products. There's health and hygiene, a big move to healthier lifestyles. And then supply chains needs to be much more resilient, because there's a demand for now. There's people who want instant gratification. So very flexible, resilient supply chains. Deglobalization, so spoke about earlier, but it's more localized. And then the whole environment thing, etc. And then if we look at the urbanization and talk about the 15-minute cities. So cities in the future, if you're sitting somewhere in the world, whatever your wildest dream, what you want, be it fresh fruit, any gadget, any product you want, within 15 minutes of your reach you can get that. So a lot of production and things moving closer to cities. So those are sort of mega trends. So if we look at it across the FMCG value chain, and we look at the future of food and the movement of goods, and also the future of retail, what does that mean? So a lot of trends coming out. So personal nutrition, very important. People, it's going to be individualized, and people getting their choices for their individuals. Locally produced, and the lockdown diets, we've seen the grocery markets change since lockdown. You know, people buying meal, producing food at home, and have a different basket of foods. The movement of foods, of goods, obviously, a lot of micro decentralized supply chains, localized, quick delivery, sort of on-demand requirements, and then smart logistics, and we talk about digital twins. So digital twins, every product having a digital footprint. You know, from the beginning of the supply chain, from manufacturing all the way through to the end, and that digital twins. And then obviously, how all this is served to the consumer, the future of retail. So omni-channel, very important. E-commerce, in the store, etc., and how does that all interact? And then live commerce, so e-commerce, as I said earlier, and then the future packaging of consumer goods. So a lot of these things, but the importance is really that all these trends play off one another. They're all interactive, and sort of that's where the world is moving to. So if you look at future of food production, trust and transparency, use trust and transparency issues. So people want to know where the food comes from, what is in the food, how's it being produced, what the packaging provides, etc. So need to know that, and then there's the desire to be good. So what is the enablers of those trends? That's the Internet of Things and blockchain technology. Not sure whether blockchain technology was spoken about in this conference, but that is really a record of a product all the way through its lifespan, all the touch points, etc. And a good example of that is things like Bitcoin. You know, these currencies, what's the word? Cryptocurrencies. They are based on blockchain. So look at new business models. The trends there, really the rise of online. We've seen that really increasing now with the pandemic, people buying from home. And I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses here. It's pretty small. Personalized nutrition, and the enablers for those things is really flexible fulfillment. Retailers and co-packers, etc., need to work closely together to have a personalized individual package for people. And then there's the lockdown diets. So in there, again, protein, previous speakers spoke about protein, still very appeals, but nowadays they actually manufacture protein in labs. And then there's going to be the additives being put to it. So if you want beef or turkey or chicken, they just put additive to a processed protein. Sort of boggles the mind, but that's where we're going. So additive manufacturing, enabler in that space. So really, the two big things. If we say, so what does it mean to us? So locally produced, obviously shorter distances. And do we need full pallet loads? Probably smaller containers, smaller packages. And then the supply chain migration, really from much more integrated and localized and smaller packages. So, and the belief that local is better. Personal nutrition, where people individualize, you can order your meal exactly what you want according to your diet, etc. So already there's with Nestle, there's a board you can put in your blood type, etc. They produce a preferred meal type to you, etc. You know what you need, etc. And then you can order accordingly. So personalized meal kits from retailers, something to look forward to, and mass production personalization. So really putting the final product where they put it together, moving that up in the supply chain, closer to the consumer. So there's a lot of collaboration needed there between the manufacturers, co-packers, retailers, etc. So what does that mean for our industry? So just the future of food is going to look different to what we know today. And I think the previous speaker also spoke about that, how that's going to change. So I think closer to our industry is the future of retail. What does that look like? So omni-engagement, obviously a big thing. And this needs to be seamlessly work with one another, unified commerce. So retailers needs to have the e-commerce platforms, but then also they're going to have the storefronts and touch this e-commerce. So the enablers for that, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and QR codes. So you'll find that products start communicating with the system. So you can have a carton of milk in your fridge, and when that gets to a certain level, it speaks to your fridge, which speaks to the retailer, and your next carton is on its way. Those sort of things. That's going to happen. The store of the future is going to look very different. So there's going to be a division between sort of the fresh and the stuff that's on the shelf. But a lot of products are not, you're not going to find that in shelves anymore. It's going to be a dark room, it's going to be in the back end of it. So there's a lot of benefits from that, in packaging, etc. So enablers for that is really automation and apps and tech, etc. So dark rooms and storefronts and interacting with the consumer on a different level. And then change on to product packaging. So a lot of it has been spoken about, the whole retail online. I don't know whether we spoke about augmented reality, but that's going to be a thing in the future. Where you go into the store and you can put on the sort of 3D goggles, you can interact with the product, you can see it, feel it, etc. and say, this is what I want. And then they bring it to you from a warehouse to the back, packaged in a brown packaging bag, etc. So you don't need all that self-ready packaging. And so a lot of movement in that space as well. So omni-engagement, really consumers wanting to interact seamlessly across a number of platforms. So what does that mean for us? So what? So brands can sell directly to consumers. So there's an example of Heinz, PepsiCo, Nestle, directly consumers. So cutting out the middleman, cutting out retailers, etc. So that's an area. And automated micro-performance centers and dark rooms. So I spoke about that earlier. So where you interact with the product differently and you get it out of a dark room. And then the store of the future. I have spoken about that. That sort of automated service. There's going to be a lower importance on brand and self-ready packaging. An example of that is the Heinz products. And then promotional landscape for dry goods is set to change. So the products that you're going to find in store is the fresh stuff, etc. But the dry goods are going to move outside. And there's some examples already. I put on top of that, I put Argos. Argos, that the store in the UK, I just had a personal experience of that in February last year, just before the pandemic struck. I was lucky just to get home in time. But visiting my daughter, and we went into one of these stores. They've got no product in the store. It's only catalogs and TV screens, and you can look for things. And then you walk, and then you decide what you want, and you go to the lady, and they sell watches and cell phones and couches and everything. And if it's a small product, they'll go fetch it outside and bring it to you. Something big, they'll tell you, go back tomorrow and we'll have it here, or they'll deliver it to you. But the storefront itself is just an advertising sort of space. I think in SA, the closest we've got to that, I think, is like the eye stores. If you go to an eye store, you don't really see product. You know, they're there and you can interact with it, but when you buy something, they fetch it from the back. So that's really the stores of the future. So if we move forward to the future of material handling. On-demand economy, instantaneous gratification. So really, small cases, flexible, getting to you in quick time. So enablers, I mentioned earlier, the digital twins and Internet of Things. So really a smart, flexible supply chain needed. Smart logistics. I don't think we're going to see warehouses with pallets and things. You know, a lot of cloak boxes and smart devices, etc. A lot of automation and robotics. Again, we talk globally. On this continent, SA, I mean, we do have a lot of unemployment, etc. So you have to look at it with that lens. But I guess it's on its way. And then transparency and connectivity, and the need to know, you know, where things come from, where they've been, etc. There's also the whole track and trace, enablers, RFID, blockchain. So the race with digital. So really smart, flexible, and responsive supply chains. So micro supply chain, short, flexible, and fast. So what does that mean? Really decentralization, less big DCs, and more smaller local DCs, and on-demand fulfillment. So that's a big thing. Putting things together further down the supply chain. I've got that market inside their Walmart. They've got a patent pending for trucks delivering to stores, where the traditional model is a first in, first out model. Trucks come there, the first one is served, and move out. Where they're now looking at geofencing that store and interacting with the trucks, and the SKUs that is lowest on stock, most critical, those trucks are prioritized. How they deliver to their stores. It makes a lot of sense and can probably bring down inventories as well. The future warehouses, a lot of automation, probably not pallets, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of e-commerce interaction with the warehouses, product coming into the warehouses, spending there a couple of hours before it leaves for the end consumers. So really just a stopover station, and probably a station where different products are put together, etc. So and that whole ecosystem, how does it work with one another? So a fascinating space, and I'd like to show you a video that sort of illustrates that. I don't know where to click for the video. Are you there? Thank you.
Right, and instead of people walking up and down the aisles of a traditional grocery store to pick up items, these little devices move more than 1 million items every day between them. Instead of trying to build machines that fit into a world designed for humans, this entire facility, the size of 7 football fields, is custom built to make this as efficient as possible. I cannot get across on camera just how incredibly large this whole place is. The top speed of those boxes is about 14 kilometers an hour, and they pass within 5 millimeters of each other when they move. So, how many robots are there in the Hive? Well, that depends on how you count them.
What you're looking at behind me is the Hive. We've got the grid, which is the metal structure. It's filled with product. So that product is housed within what we call totes, or these open boxes that you can see at the top of the grid. We have around 2,300 bots, and they move the stock around the warehouse so that we can pair it up with customer orders to be delivered. The bots will move in the X and Y direction. They can also move in the Z direction. So we have a cable hoist system that means that they can lower down a gripper assembly and grab onto the stock that we have in the grid. In some areas we have as deep as 21 totes all in a line. We have sensors underneath the bot. That means that every time it passes over one of the squares on the grid, it has a laser underneath it that can tell when it moves over that cell. So it will say, I passed a cell, I passed a cell, I passed a cell. We have around 58,000 different types of individual products within the grid. We'll use the huge amounts of data that we gather to understand what customers are most likely to order and place them in the easiest to reach locations for bots. All of that combined means that we can have stock into the warehouse and out again from our suppliers into a delivery van in just 5 hours.
The robots deliver their crates over to the packing area. Some of that packing is done by humans, but there are mechanical arms as well. One of the big problems they've got to solve is that grocery packaging is designed for people, and the interactions between all the objects they deal with can be complicated.
Currently we're standing underneath the grid structure that we saw earlier. The robots that we saw are actually dropping off products to the station. Once they're dropped off, they become in control of the robot, and the robot decides how to pick them before the grid robot picks up the tote and takes it away again. There's 2 3D cameras above the totes that takes an image of the storage box before it picks from it, decides on the best grasp point, confirm that the product is correct, and then place it into customer shopping. And it's doing all of that on live customer orders. We make sure that we don't mix something that's heavy with something that's soft. There are things that the robot can't pack, things such as very, very heavy, very large, or very fragile items, but there's a lot of range in between that.
It's fairly safe to call each individual packing arm a robot. Each one has a separate controller, and it has to make a lot of decisions in real time using cameras and sensors on each individual arm. But here in the Hive, it's not quite as simple.
Controlling all of this is what we refer to as the Hive mind. So this artificial intelligence system that controls everything. Once the stock comes in, from that exact point that it enters the system, the Hive mind will track its every single movement. The Hive mind will tell the bots exactly where they need to stop, but it is the bot's control system that allows it to follow a movement profile and stop exactly as the Hive mind expects it to. There's just a 5mm gap between bots, so that's both as they pass each other and if they stop next to a bot as well. This bot with the orange light may have experienced something within its sensors and all of those readings it's taking, that when it feeds that back to the Hive mind, it's not quite what the Hive mind was expecting, so it just brings it to a safe stop for investigation. We do have a number of grid operators that sit at the edge of the grid, and they're able to use our CCTV system that we have above the grid to look at exactly what's going on with that bot, and they can try and fix that remotely and send commands to the bot wirelessly.
The boundary between individual and group is a little blurry. Is a termite colony and a collection of individuals working together, or one big superorganism? Is the microbiome in your gut part of you? Because in the last couple of decades, scientists have started to work out that the bacteria in your digestive system produce and consume neurotransmitters that affect how you think. But most people wouldn't consider their gut bacteria to be part of them. We tend to ascribe intelligence and identity to things that act at roughly our scale. It's easy to look at the Hive, see the moving boxes and go, okay, 2,000 robots. But with only one controller, and the boxes just following the paths they're given, I'd say there's a good argument that that is one robot with 2,000 ways to interact with the world. Thank you so much to everyone here at Ocado. There is a link to them and more about their technology in the description.
So this stuff is real. This is happening. To us, it's out there, but it's happening. So to conclude, with the trends and things that we see, we can see that people's diets are going to change. What we're going to eat, how the food, etc., is going to get to it, and what we're going to demand is going to be different. How we get the food and interact with stores, etc., that's going to change. Storefronts, etc., is going to change. And then, I guess, how do we get all that to the consumer? Is the big challenge. So really, to my mind, the takeaways are are more localized, shorter, flexible supply chains, smaller unit loads, and putting products together further down the supply chain. And with that, hopefully I've made a bit of time. I see there's 10 minutes for questions. I've still got 13 minutes on the clock, so we made it 3 minutes. And if you don't ask a lot of questions, I'll make up even more.
Hermann, how do you see your business changing in South Africa in line with this? Because your biggest product line is wooden pallets. In 10 years' time, can you give us kind of a description as to how you see your business?
I said up front, it's not a CHEP presentation. Yeah, it is a challenge, Loki. It is a challenge. You know, I don't think South Africa will follow that route. It probably will get there eventually, but not as quick. You know, we've got a lot of unemployed people, etc. So, are we going to move to this level of automation and robotics, etc.? You know, I don't know. So it is a burning question. Quite frankly, I don't know. It's a big answer. It is a concern. It is something that we need to be cognizant of. So this presentation, you probably felt it that I sort of skipped over a couple of slides. It wasn't my material really. It was from group level, and produced internally for us to think about the future and where we're going, and to think about how we're going to stay relevant. So it's a work in progress. Yes.
Hi, Hermann. I just wanted to ask, do you think we have the necessary tech in South Africa to compete with the world trends in the high competition in supply chain as well as retail space?
I do think we've got the talent. It's a question of keeping the talent here and growing the talent. I think there's certainly a will. There's a lot of opportunity. I'm very positive about the opportunities. It's whether we are capable to actually, you know, address those opportunities and you know, get to the answers. And for that we need the talent. But I do think we've got a lot of IT skills in this country, but a lot of them, you know, is leaving as well. So it is, how do we keep our talent here? How do we enthuse people and keep them excited? And utilize the technology and that talent to solve unique African and South African problems. I don't think the answer is necessarily just leapfrogging to what we've seen here. You know, we've got other challenges, but we can come up with solutions that will make those people sit up and say, well, you know, we didn't even think of that. Yes?
I just want to ask, you mentioned earlier on about the smaller DCs as opposed to the one big DC. Can you just elaborate a bit more on that? How would that help us in South Africa currently?
Again, this is a global slide deck. So I think of European cities, you know. So and I think if you think of it in a European context, then this makes a lot of sense because cities are closer to one another, and there's been a lot of traffic across country, etc., where that's being reduced to more localized cities, etc. So cities within the country. So if I look at the South African context, probably here where we are in Haupt is the most metropolitan area that makes the most sense. So, and I don't see that we're going that route necessarily. You know, one of our bigger retailers are now planning a big mega DC for this whole area, where if you look at these trends, you'd think you'd rather have a smaller DC in Pretoria, on the East Rand, on the East Rand, one on the West Rand, you know, I don't know. But our cities are still far from one another. So if you look at Durban, Cape Town, BE, Bloemfontein, so, you know, we're still quite a dispersed geography. So I don't think that specific trend is that pertinent here. But I think what we do need to look at is e-commerce and getting product to consumers in short spaces of time. So that's the trend that drives us, is the smaller localized fulfillment centers. So how do you get an on-demand meal in a short space of time to somebody that sits in Bloemfontein? You'll have to have a fulfillment center there. Currently that's served from Johannesburg. You know, so I think those are the calls that you have to. So that's the trend. So how quickly are we going to follow that trend? And if we follow it quickly, then you'll see those things splitting up. But I think in a European sense, in a European view, that makes more sense. Is that it? So, Loki, I'm giving you 7 minutes back on your burger.
Thank you very much.